I think change is a big thing too. As ironic as it is, that the only thing that's actually constant is change is the thing that we seem to resist the most, which is fascinating to me. And you can go really deep into the mind in terms of why that happens. I sometimes attribute to the ego just being that warm, comfortable, cozy couch with a blanket on it. And the ego doesn't really want things to change. It wants everything to stay the same because that's where you're comfortable. It's trying to give you that comfort and that maybe like you are when you're in the womb. Everything's comfortable. Everything feels good, even though it might not. But everything feels good when you're in that comfort zone. And I don't want too much to change. Because we know anytime we've changed, big things change around us, especially when you've constructed an environment based on your habits. The people, your friends, your family obviously will relatively stay the same, but your friends and things like that could change according to the places that you frequent. What kind of things are you doing?
Greetings, hello, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. Now, this podcast, Truehope Cast, takes a deep dive into mental health's many physiological and psychological aspects. This is the show for you if you're looking for motivation, inspiration, knowledge, and solutions. That's what we are all about here at Truehope Canada. Truehope Canada is a mind and body-based supplement company dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, please visit truehopecanada.com. Today, I welcome Derek Henry to the podcast. Now, Derek is the founder of Healing the Body and the Thrive Academy. He used nutrition, supplementation, and a holistic lifestyle to unravel 13 chronic disease conditions that conventional and alternative medical practitioners could not help him resolve. As a result of this 1 in a million health transformation and the knowledge that he acquired in the process, he's now happier and healthier than he has ever been, and he now educates coaches and others to transform their health through natural and holistic means. Since 2014, he has helped his Thrive Academy participants heal over 20 different chronic disease conditions, primarily related to digestive and autoimmune concerns. Today, we're going to be discussing big changes and healing. Enjoy the show. All right, good morning, Derek. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining Truehope Cast. How are you? What is going well?
Things going well over here, Simon. We have just a new snowfall, so we're getting ready for winter. And of course, with that, people are starting to think about what to do for the cold and flu season that's probably almost well underway here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We should certainly talk about that. So you're, apart from the people I've spoken to in person, you are the closest person I've spoken to. And, podcasting is just amazing. We're able to speak to people all over the world, but you're like an hour and a half away from me. You're in Kelowna, I'm in Kamloops, and we had some interesting conversations about the snow and the weather that we've both had now. And it's nice to know that you're so close. And we also have like a friend in common as well, and a health group as well, which is pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as an intro, why don't you let us know who you are and what it is that you do?
Okay, so who am I? Well, I mean, that might depend on how you've interacted with me. So, I could be a dad. I have 3 children myself, so I'm a dad. Anybody who's been reading my articles over the past decade would call me a health blogger. Those that have been watching my story closely would say he's the guy that reversed 13 chronic disease conditions completely on his own and naturally. Other people might see my video content. They may see me as a freedom fighter or even a truth seeker. And it'd be true that I am all of those things. But I think if I was going to wrap it up, I'd say what I'd be best known as is a health mentor, and teaching, educating, showing, guiding people to understand that good health is possible, regardless of whether you lost it or not. And I'm really trying to teach people how to be healthy in a world that seemingly seems to have been set up to do the opposite. And it's not easy these days to maintain a good level of health. And my whole goal has been to teach people how to maintain good health if they have it, and to help reverse, chronic disease conditions if they've lost it.
Beautiful. So why did you decide to start helping people with their own health? You obviously told us about some chronic conditions that you experienced. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think people's motivations, people's why is always very, very interesting because it's always super unique. But everyone I speak to on the podcast who isn't like a medical doctor who kind of like went back and started being a bit more of a functional practitioner and working a lot more holistically. And those other types of practitioners like yourself, they have had an experience and it's changed them and changed their perspective and their views on the world. And through their own journey, through their own healing, through their own transformation, they have got to a point. So yeah, I think everyone's story is very, very valuable and important. So if you wouldn't mind sharing us, how you got to the point of, supporting people with their health, like, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it started when I was 30 years old, and I didn't seem to have any health problems. But looking back, I would definitely recognize the symptoms now. But of course, back in the day, I was ignorant of whatever symptoms I was having and what that actually might mean. And at the age of 30, my health came crashing down quite abruptly and quite quickly. It wasn't a slow kind of a process of slow deterioration. I went from feeling, like a 30-year-old to feeling like I was walking death. That's really what it felt like. It wasn't some very minor disease conditions. They were all very serious, and they came on, like I said, quite quickly. So it was like the kindling was there, and everything was ready to fire up. And then I had a period of stress that ultimately blew up everything in my face. So obviously at that point in time, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what health was really. I didn't know how to use nutrition, supplements, lifestyle, or anything like that to naturally heal myself. So I was prepared for anything information that came my way, but it took a while before I actually found any information that allowed me to even understand the concept of how to heal yourself, especially yourself naturally, because I wasn't getting any answers from doctors at that point in time, just testing and, original diagnosis that I had rheumatoid arthritis, take your pain pills and go on your way. For me, that wasn't good enough. I didn't want to be in the conventional system. Even at that time, I had no desire to be poked, prodded, or prescribed anything. But that was the route that I was going if I didn't figure things out pretty quickly. So it took me probably about 2.5 years from that kind of diagnosis before I finally figured out what I was going to do. And it started with, nutrition and cleaning up different toxic products and stuff in my home. But at the time, I was dealing with so many different symptoms. It was really actually hard to keep track of them all because there were so many different things going on. To give you an idea, I said rheumatoid arthritis was one thing that I was dealing with. Candida overgrowth, hypothyroid issues, autoimmune issues. I had lots of skin disease, fatigue all the time, swollen lymph nodes, huge swollen lymph nodes. One on the inside of my arm that was about the size of a small golf ball. I had prostatitis going on, and kidney and urinary issues, waking up 6 or 7 times at night to go to the bathroom, liver problems. I had some allergies going on, acid reflux, pancreatitis. Like I said, it wasn't simple. There was a ton of things going on. So my first goal was to come off medications, pain medications, because I didn't want to be on them. And actually, they made me feel a little bit worse. Even though they did numb the pain, they made me feel worse in other ways. So I was like, I had to get off these medications.
So
So yeah,
this is so interesting because there's so much going on for you, right? But like,
yeah,
all those things start happening, and like you said, they came on quickly. You're saying like all of these things happened to you like within a year, within a few months, like, because you must have been like, how do you navigate that with a doctor when all of that stuff's going on? Because every single thing you're describing is like a different specialist. So like,
yeah.
tell me a little bit about and also I'm quite interested to wonder, like, if this happened quite quickly, like, how do you personally like explain that, looking back at like, that particular time in your life, that particular year or couple of years, like, what was going on for your body to just be like, yeah, done with trying to heal you. Here you go.
Yeah, it was fast. I felt completely normal, to be honest. And then I had done a little bit of a workout. It was shortly after Christmas. And it was just like a band workout. I wasn't even doing any weights or anything like that. And then 2 days later, it felt like I had full on rheumatoid arthritis. That's what it felt like. And so it was fast, like almost instant. There was no slow deterioration of symptoms. And then within 2 or 3 months, I would say, all these other symptoms started to come in. There's a point in time where I could only move my neck side to side like 5 to 10 degrees. That's when I knew I was in bigger trouble. And of course, I didn't really want to go to a doctor for several reasons. So it took me probably 4 or 5 months to even go to one.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, and probably because I didn't feel like there was not much they were going to do. And even when I did, I got the blood test and everything else, and that came back. It was just a prescription anyway, which I didn't want. So I was like, this isn't the answer. I knew it wouldn't be, but I guess I know for as comforting as that was. I honestly don't know how I survived those 2 years, to be completely honest, in terms of how badly I felt. I look back at it now, I'm like, how did you even manage, at that time, having a young child, and having to work, 40 hours a week, doing the regular 40 hour a week job. And also the first thing I did start going was to massage therapist and chiropractic, just to help kind of relieve some of the issues that I was having. But that wasn't solving the issue. It was just actually helping manage it at that time.
Yeah. Did you try those things first? Because you said that you didn't really know much about health.
Yep.
And I just feel like for most people who, don't know about like health and nutrition and all the wonderful things that go along with that, they would go to a conventional doctor. Like that would just be like the, standard procedure for most people when they start feeling symptoms or start feeling ill, especially when they're compounding in a couple of months time,
Yes. Yep.
So was there another reason that you didn't like want to go see a doctor?
All I could say is I just have a healthy fear of doctors in the medical
Okay.
system.
That's
And
healthy. That's
yeah,
normal.
yeah, I call it a healthy fear because it is. And I didn't really realize at the time, and I really didn't want to be poked and prodded, and I didn't want to be diagnosed with a bunch of things and have them put that into my brain. So I thought I
Sure.
got to figure this out myself. So it was just my personality. There was no desire to go that route. I seen that route myself before. Even maybe that's part of it too. With my father, at age 15, who died of prostate cancer, I saw what they put him through, and maybe that was still. Even though this was 15 years later, maybe part of that played a part of it, that I didn't want to see the same thing happen to me, regardless of what it was, because I was even concerned that they might even bring up that diagnosis, and that is certainly something I did not want to place on me. So it's almost like if I don't know about it, kind of plug your ears and go la la la. If I don't know about it, then it's not happening.
Sure.
It worked out for me in the end. It might not work out for everybody, but it worked out for me. So it took me about a year to do anything, really, other than just grind my way through it on a day-to-day basis. And then after a year, I started to see a massage therapist who slowly but surely started working out a little bit of the pain, minor stuff though, like, even 5, 10, 15% of reduction of my pain was a big deal. And I did that for a year before I even figured out to do anything else. And I was going to chiropractic in between as well, who were doing adjustments with me on my neck and things like that, which again, this would only last 2 or 3 days. And then the neck would be completely out of shape again. And I just have to go back. And I'm like, I can't sustain this. I can't manage this. There's no way I'm going to continue to do this, but this is all I know how to do until I figure it out. So I had to do that for a couple of years, until nutrition came in. And, I discovered an article, or someone sent me an article on broccoli, how it could heal cancer. And it was for my father-in-law at the time. But I read it and I was like, wow, nutrition can actually do this. And from the easiest way to say is down the rabbit hole I went.
Sure.
And I never came back up for air for probably 3 years. I just studied intensely, 3 to 5 hours a day. I was studying nutrition and everything else. And I started to piece together that and some supplements and other things. And I started to feel better on a day-to-day basis. So it wasn't, there was no turnaround. Like as quickly as it happened, there was no quick turnaround like that. It was a journey of 3 years of me being hardcore into everything that I could possibly do naturally by myself. And actually after 3 years, getting back to a place where I felt relatively normal, no medications. I came off those fairly quickly, thanks to the foods I was eating and certain supplements I was taking. And then I just started overhauling everything. And it took, it was a long time for me to kind of change everything to a point where I felt like I was completely normal again. But it was a long trip, and that's basically what I focused on. I focused on my food, focus on detox, obviously cleansing. That's the simplified version of it, and focus on certain supplements and lifestyle factors and all that stuff together. After a period of about 5 years, I kind of got myself back to where I'm like, okay, I'm about where I was before this all started. And then I did it for a few more years, probably another 5 years. I kind of went deeper and deeper until a point that I was like, I've never felt this good in my entire life. So it's a good testimony that if you have the right faith, determination, and you can get some good direction and you follow it closely, that I had the kind of success that very few people probably are able to get, especially if you're going to conventional medicine, because they're certainly not going to heal you in those ways.
So you had these symptoms for a year, and then you started to do something about some of the pain with massage therapy and chiropractic. And it's kind of funny that neither of those practitioners discussed like what you were eating or what you weren't eating and like other factors. Like it's kind of interesting that they wouldn't maybe ask a question or investigate those things. I don't know how in depth their intake form was, or how much you generally don't go to a massage therapist and tell them about, your, I don't know, your thyroid stuff, like it's usually about like the pain and things that you would go through. So that's just interesting. But then like after that, like a year or two later, you get this article about broccoli. It starts changing your mind a little bit about nutrition and food. And that's really interesting. What do you think you learned about your like your past self, because I'm sure we can call it that at this point, you know, that personality when you were like 30 and you're experiencing, you know, quite a lot of physical and I'm sure psychological trauma. What did you learn about your past self during that transformation? Because it sounds like it was like quite inspiring time for you that clearly like changed your mind, even just from the point of reading that article to just like spark all these new thoughts and ideas, and it clearly like kicked you into action.
Yeah, yeah. I say, you know, if I was to look back at my old self, I'd say I was largely complacent about health, period.
Right.
And that's what got me to the place where I was, because I never determined that it was actually an important thing to do. It's just something that everybody had, and if you didn't, if you had, you know, bad health, it was just bad luck. And I realized that is completely untrue. You know, we're living in a society that definitely isn't set up to make us healthy. I know that. But it wasn't bad luck. There's always reasons for underlying disease conditions and why they come up. It just few of us understand how that develops because we're never told or educated about how that could even happen or what the symptoms even look like. So I'm not sure. You know, you mentioned before, when did you decide that you wanted to help people with it? I don't. It's a tricky one to. It's an interesting word because I'm not sure that I decided. It's almost like it was decided for me. I never woke up one day and said, people need to know about this. I just wouldn't shut up about it. As soon as I started getting healthy, it's just like I couldn't shut up about it. I was telling everybody that I knew just to listen. You know, you should be doing this. You should be changing this. I'll remove this from your house. Drink your smoothies. All this kind of stuff. And I'm sure I was really obnoxious. But when you are healing yourself and you're seeing these changes happen, you're seeing people going to doctors' offices and things like that, and you're thinking these people could actually heal themselves through food and avoid the doctor visits and all those other things that aren't helping. I was a man on fire. It didn't matter if you wanted to listen or not. You were going to hear from me about it if you brought, especially friends and family. They probably got bored and annoyed of me really quickly. So I just became, you know, a man on fire, and I would just, I wouldn't stop talking about it. And here I am 15 years later, and I'm still not stopping talking about it. And actually it's only gotten more intense over the past few years, given a lot of things that have happened over the past couple of years. I've been even more intense on this in terms of trying to teach people and educate people that they can overcome these things, because we get a lot of these ideas in our heads, and often from conventional medicine, that you can't heal this, you can't cure this. There's no cure for that. And to obviously all the things that I say, I did this myself. I overcame all these diseases you're talking about. I've helped other people overcome them for 8 years now. So what you're being told is a lie. Now, I'm not saying they're lying to you. It's just they're in a circle of people that don't heal people. So they don't understand what it takes or what you need to do. So if you want to understand that, you need to go to the people who've done the things that you want to do. So it kind of almost like the decision was made. I was, you know, whether you want to say I was made for that moment or I was, you know, I had this experience for a reason. There was no real decision. It just, I started waking up and I just started talking to people about it as my journey went on. And then eventually I did sort of, I guess, quote unquote, decide that I'm going to do this at another level, not just, you know, talk to friends and family. I'm going to start get my website fired up. I'm going to start making some programs for people so they can do what I did. So I waited until I had largely healed myself before I decided to do that, because I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to lead by example, and I wanted to show that I have done it. So that's kind of when I guess maybe made a bigger decision to do this, you know, as a practitioner, rather than just some guy that's going to stick, you know, if you give him 5 minutes, he'll tell you everything you need to know about nutrition and how you heal with it.
During that like, so let's say peak of your symptomology, when you've got like, you know, this stack of things going on, and if you could go back and say to 30-year-old Derek, like, I'll do this first because this really, really helped, whether it was like massage to get rid of the pain, or chiro to get rid of the inflammation, or whatever it was, like, or nutritional supplements. Is there like one thing that you could recognize that, like, you know, knocked off 4 or 5 of these like layers of symptoms?
Yeah. If I was to go back there, the first thing I would have told myself is, Derek, you need to be on a healing diet. That would have been the first thing, because that's the thing that's been the most profound for me. And that's different than a clean diet. And, you know, we talk these days, obviously, about organic food and how important that is. Obviously, being able to have highly nutritious food that doesn't have any toxic burden associated with it, that could get trapped in your physiology and then create all kinds of dissonance and problems. So a lot of people are eating clean diets. They're interested in their health, meaning they're eating organic food, but they're eating any type of food, really. There's no discernment in terms of what types of foods will heal certain health problems better than others. If I had that healing diet back in the day, my journey would have never, ever taken that long. I was just figuring it out. I was eating just all kinds of good food that I could, organic and everything else, which, you know, back then was considered woo-woo. to eat organic diet. I was like, there's nothing good with organic diet. There's no benefit from an organic diet as opposed to a non-organic one. Well, of course, now people that are in the health industry would, or any health enthusiast would argue that no, organic matters. But that's the state of where we were at that point in time, where people, that was new in the area that I was in anyway, in the region that I was in. So if I would have pulled that off early, that would have changed everything, because for me, there's only two real reasons that people get sick. I've kind of summed it up after all these years. I kind of summed up to, because I always want to make things simple for people, because things are often incredibly complicated. Big words are used, scientific words, and we're not often given a lot of insight, and we don't understand what's going on. But I've really boiled it down to only two things create all these chronic diseases that we're dealing with, whether it's allergies all the way to cancer, in my opinion. And that is, the first one is infections. And infections could be biological ones, like parasites or bacteria or viruses or fungus, things like that. They could be chemical ones, which many of us are, we understand, like heavy metals or fluoride or parabens, pesticides, glyphosate, prescriptions, all those kinds of things. And then the third one, which is a little bit, again, we get into I call it ethereal infections. And that's more stuff like non-native EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies that can create chaos in our cells, and things like emotional traumas that can cause people a lot of stress. I call all those things infections. You usually get a combination of those infections is what starts everything. And then that leads to the second point, which is malnourishment or nutrient deficiencies or imbalances. You get that kind of disease going, you're going to burn through nutrients really, really quickly, because the body's trying to offset that inflammation that's being caused by all majority of those types of infections. So with the healing diet, that can do that. And we call it, the buzzword is detox or cleansing, right? That's still a big word. So with the diet that I have, the healing diet, that helped remove two of those three types of infections, obviously not the ethereal ones, but the biological and chemical ones, and helped rectify my nutrient deficiencies and imbalances. Focusing on those two things alone from a 30,000 foot view is really what allowed me to get there. Obviously focused in a way that those nutrients and things that I was taking in were largely digestible, there's lots of hydration, things like that, things that are important. Because I often teach people that, you're not so much what you eat as you are what you digest. And that's lost by a lot of people. Things that we put in our mouth don't necessarily digest properly, especially if we got, our digestive infrastructure has been broken down. But if you get that right, that's where that healing diet comes in again. I think if I had that back then, I would have cut my journey probably into a third at least. There would have been some time that I still would have needed, because there was a lot going on to remove all that stuff and replace those deficiencies and imbalances. But I would have got on it way faster rather than kind of wandering in the desert, which was what I was doing, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's so important to look at obviously what we're putting into our body, what's the input, whether that is actually food, whether that's drink, whether that's supplements, or is that like meditation or yoga, like how we're experiencing our spiritual self. Obviously that's that comes into consideration hugely. But in my experience as a nutritionist, and just like interviewing lots of different people, and the whole diet craze thing is very, very super fascinating. The psychology that people go through with that whole thing. Everyone's tried a diet, or at least one.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the healing benefits of a diet, it's not what you eat, it's what you don't eat. Because we're obviously we'll have these normal habitual times where we will, consume foods that we know are not going to serve us, but we go to them through habit, through minor addictions, through their effect on our biochemistry, especially our neurochemistry. So it's very, those things obviously play a big part. But I was having a little dinner party last week, and somebody brought up the idea of a celery cleanse. And I've never done a celery cleanse myself personally. And being the nutritionist at the table, I get asked my opinion, which is cool. And I just thought about it for a second. I thought, when people do a celery cleanse, I don't know if they're just consuming celery. I think the people who were at the table, they've just consumed like celery juice like 3-4 times a day, and that's everything they produce. And I just thought, well, there's definitely going to be some nutritional benefits in celery. It's a healthy vegetable. It's green. It's going to have phytonutrients. It's going to have, water and all these other things, and insoluble fiber as well. So I'm like, that's going to be great for you for sure. But there's no way you can do that forever. But it's also I wonder what your body is not having to deal with anymore, like your digestive system, your liver, all these things that are not going to be in your body floating around causing toxicity, like the soda drinks and the sugars and the the processed fats and the processed foods just in general, they're not in circulation anymore. So your body is not having to actually deal with those and get rid of them, whether they can actually do that through, excretion or storing it up in fat. Like a lot of toxins get stored up in fat. People don't really recognize that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's so important to just think about like what is actually serving you, what is making you feel really, really good, because people just bounce from diet to diet to diet, right? And the common theme is you do feel well for like a week or two, and it's very difficult to keep up that particular restricted thing for a while. But usually what makes people feel really good is what they're not eating, and they're finally giving their body the ability and the position to be in a state where it's, oh my god, like Simon is no longer eating all that garbage. I don't have to spend all those resources dealing with that now. I can put resources towards like making him feel good, making him rebalance his microbiome, to make him start producing the right neurochemistry and to start craving good foods. Because I'm sure on your journey, because you had so much motivation and drive behind everything, as soon as you started to try better foods and you start to do all these things, and I'm sure were thinking, I'm not going to consume this bad food now because I don't want to feel bad anymore, and then your body starts to just like crave all these good things. And yeah, I just think it's interesting in regards to, we're not what we eat, we're what we absorb. But also like when we're avoiding consuming foods that just will not serve us, and also consuming information and people and energies and frequencies that are just not going to serve us, like psychologically,
Mhm.
like then our body and our brain can just be like, oh my god, thank god, like he's out of the way and I'm not having to deal with that anymore, and it can just do what it does best, which is just to make us feel amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a very key point that I talk to a lot of people about, is that when we get on these, we'll say fad diets, or some of them aren't even diets. Like you said, sometimes it could just be celery juice, right? Which, I know where the celery juice fad, we'll call it, came from. And I do think that celery juice has a lot of important qualities that can definitely help people heal themselves. The biggest thing that you brought up that I often bring up, though, is if you're actually going to heal something and you're going to eliminate the foods that are causing you distress, which was one part of it, which a lot of people do, right? Elimination diets is a good example. They're very popular, and I say that's important, yes, to remove the triggers, but it's also important to incorporate regularly the foods that are actually going to heal the problem. Removing the triggers is just one part of it, but the big word here is, and this is what I focus on with the stuff that I do as well, and this is where it has to become a lifestyle, is sustainability. No one is going to sustain a 32 ounce a day celery juice habit for long. I can guarantee that. You're definitely not going to do it. If you've done it for a year or longer, I mean, you're a superhero. I don't know where you would come up with the discipline to be able to actually pull that off. But nor do you want to do that for that long. It's very myopic. There's so many other things that you could be missing. But for a short period of time, or as part of an overall plan, sure, that could be part of it. But for me, when I do things, I know that healing, if you're going to heal anything that's major, we'll say any kind of chronic disease label that you've inherited or that you've been told you have, you're going to need to do it for a longer period of time than 10 days or whatever. You're going to have to do it at least for a couple months and do it extremely well. So if you want to do that, then it's got to be sustainable. Well, how do you make things sustainable? Well, you got to make it a little bit easier. You got to make things so they're tasty, so they don't taste like dirt every day, or I've done a lot of things, Simon, where I've drank a lot of drinks and things that really tasted nasty. And I was okay with that. But in the end, I was like, you know what? If I want to keep on doing this healthy thing, I got to start preparing foods that are healthy and delicious.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people confuse that. They think that you need to drink the 32 ounces of celery juice or eat the 8 ounces of wheatgrass a day to be healthy. That's not the case. I mean, those are things that I did, but I don't do those now. But I sustain my health because of all the other healthy preparations I have that are tasty, because that means I want to keep on coming back to them. And I'll keep on eating them because they taste good. And of course, as you said, things will change. Your taste buds will change as your microbiome changes in terms of things you like and you don't like. But if it is going to be sustainable, you want to do it for a period of time. You want it to be enjoyable and delicious, and you're not going to pull that off by some of these. Well, some of the fad diets are they are created in a way that people can keep their weaknesses and still still try to get the results. But some of the stuff we're talking about, like I said, celery juice and wheatgrass and even juicing, all those things are good things. But again, not sustainable. And if you can't sustain something, it's going to be very difficult to overcome a chronic health problem.
Yeah, what I think about a lot is how and why humans have got such a lack of capability in regards to actually making big changes before the big trauma or the tragedy or the diagnosis comes along. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon, because we just like believe everything's going to be fine and okay. And it's quite remarkable what the body can actually put up with when it's actually feeling and not doing very well. And, you know, so many people walk around with just like their pain and their inflammation that they believe to just be normal, and they can just like medicate for it or get on with it. And then they just forget how like amazing feeling good feels. And for some people, it's like, the last time they felt great was when they were like 10 or 11 or 12 years old, you know, and, you know, I've got no memory of that personally. And the taste bud thing is very interesting, because some of the foods that I would have just been like, oh, no way, I'm going to eat that when I was like 18. Some of the most delicious foods now, because, you know, my body craves that nutrition. My taste buds have completely changed, and its connection to my brain. But yeah, it's like, what's your, because you know, you didn't step into that big change until something big happened to you. And the same thing happened to me. Like, it was an operation between my parents and an engagement with 3 doctors who were just like super geniuses at this operation, but their nutritional experience and advice was just an absolute catastrophe. And that just blew my mind up in regards to health, nutrition, and things that we super just take for granted, and we don't really like learn about in school, like about nutrition and how that can change your physiology and your psychology. But like, yeah, what's your opinion in regards to that like big change moment, and why do we have to wait for that trauma and that tragedy to really come up before we start like getting our own stuff into gear, when we probably know like a lot of we'll know in our own personal life what's serving us and what isn't. You know, everyone can have 100 different foods on a table, 50 of them are healthy, 50 of them are unhealthy, and separate them. We can all do that. Like, we're all completely aware of of those things. Well, I'd say most of us are completely aware of those things, I suppose. But like, what is it about the fact that we wait for this big, tragic, huge moment that starts changing our brain a little bit to thinking different thoughts?
It's a good question. You know, there's that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think a lot of times, even though we don't understand what true health actually looks like, and that's part of the problem, whether we like it or not, the benchmark for health out there isn't very good. And it's because of the different things that we've been inundated with, and how, like I said, the world hasn't really been set up for us to be healthy right from day one, right from birth. So we don't even know what good health looks like, and we compare ourselves to other people. And maybe we get into that herd mentality a little bit, right? You know, we get into those social constructs where people eat a certain type of way, and we don't want to be offensive to people, especially in Canada, right? You know, we don't want to offend anybody, so we want to make sure that we stay in line with what everyone else is doing. And sometimes as a part of it, right, there's a social aspect to that, and certainly there's a social aspect with eating. We know to any parties or things you go to, there's always eating involved, and usually it's not great food. And, you know, as I started to change my diet, I was kind of the outsider. I was the outlier. You know, I'm not going to have that. Why aren't you going to have that? What, you're all healthy now and stuff? Like, there was this criticism about someone actually trying to be healthy. But for me, it didn't really matter. I'm very stubborn. I was very set in my place that, you know, you're not dealing with the problems I'm dealing with. You don't have to deal with the aftermath if I eat that kind of food. So I'm just not going to listen to you. I'm going to do my thing. If you don't like it and you don't invite me to more parties, I'm okay with that. But most people don't want to do that. And I get it. You don't want to be that black sheep. Among all the people. So you go as long as you can, not change as many things as you can, so you can continue to fit in with everybody. Meanwhile, you could be dying inside and you don't know what's going on. So why do we wait for that moment? I mean, I think change is a big thing too. As ironic as it is, that the only thing that's actually constant is change. It's the thing that we seem to resist the most, which is fascinating to me. And you can go really deep into the mind in terms of why that happens. I sometimes attribute to the ego, just being that warm, comfortable, cozy couch with a blanket on it. And, you know, the ego doesn't really want things to change. It wants everything to stay the same, because that's where you're comfortable. It's trying to give you that comfort, and that, you know, maybe like you are when you're in the womb, everything's comfortable, everything feels good, even though it might not. But, you know, everything feels good when you're in that comfort zone, and I don't want too much to change. Because we know anytime we've changed, big things change around us, especially when you've constructed an environment based on your habits. You know, the people, your friends, your family obviously will relatively stay the same, but your, you know, friends and things like that could change according to the places that you frequent. What kind of things are you doing? And so again, I think the ego is largely in control there. It doesn't want anything really largely to change until something breaks. And when something breaks, like it did with me, in my case, I'm pretty binary. It's either I'm on or I'm off. As I say to many people, I don't do things half-assed. I use my full ass all the time. But sometimes I'm doing things half-assed because I don't know what I'm doing. And a lot of people are. And I completely get it. Been there, done that. But once I decided that I'm doing this, you know, for me, it was very simple. It's like, either I do this now or I'm going to die, or I'm going to be, you know, a walking zombie, because I'm going to be on so many medications and things. I'm going to be in pain every single day. I'm only 30. There's no way I'm putting up with this. If I last another 20, 30 years, which would be highly suspect, I do not want to go through this on a day-to-day basis, that many days again for this to happen. So I think it took the breaking of the ego. And I find this with a lot of people that have had, similar health journeys, maybe to me in some ways. There's always everything. The thing that turned around was the rock bottom. Many of us are kind of treading water in between. We're not exactly swimming, but we're not exactly drowning. We're somewhere in between. We're treading water. Everything seems to be okay. And it's not until you hit rock bottom like I did, and you're like, ouch, that hurt. Something has to change. And I think that's unfortunately where some people need to get to, because I think that's when change is going to be the most appetizing, when there's no other option out. You've burned your boats. You have no choice but to fight this thing and stay on shore. And that's what I had to do. So, the human mind's fascinating in terms of why we put ourselves in certain positions and why we don't want to change, even though it might be for the better. But I think it is a battle between maybe our ego and maybe our spirituality, the battle between the two, where to me, the ego wants you to stay comfortable, where maybe the more spiritual side of you wants you to change so you can be healthy and happy.
Yeah, it's literally a case of being woken up from an unconscious slumber, because most people, like 95% of how they think, how they feel, how they behave is like a program running unconsciously, right? So, we wake up, we make our coffee, we have our breakfast, we brush our teeth, we get changed, we get in the car, we go to work, we do all the then we come home, we do all the same things, we go to bed. So for a lot of people, they live their lives in this very, very unconscious way, where their body is just dragging their mind through the day. And when something big does happen, whether that's like the death of a loved one or a diagnosis, or something huge happens, that's the only time that your unconscious mind is going to get broken enough to start really reproducing the capacity of like maybe 50-50. You start having a lot more subconscious, you start having a lot more conscious thoughts, and start really thinking about your present day and where you are, what you're presently thinking, presently feeling, because obviously like, the thoughts are the language of the mind and emotions are the language of the body, and both of them together create like our state of being. But most people's state of being 95% of the time is unconscious, and they're not aware of it. They're not aware of like where they really are. And it sucks that they have to wait and go through maybe decades of being uncomfortable with pain and inflammation, and their body just getting into into a place of desperation and sickness and illness before and some people don't even wake up to it, even when they get the diagnosis, even when they're 300 pounds overweight and they can't get off the sofa. Like some people, that's a turning point for people, and they're like, okay, I've got to do something here, this is it. Other people just carry on with it. And it's so fascinating that us as humans have the option of going like either way. I'm very much like you in like I'm all in or I'm not in, for sure. Because 30 years of age was exactly the same time where I decided I wanted to be a healthier person, and I just wanted to change the way that I was thinking, feeling, and behaving. And it took a big event for me also as well. But I also feel like I would look back at like, oh my God, I wasted my 20s. I wasted my 20s drinking and partying, and I had an awesome time and it was great. And, it certainly has helped me develop the personality that I am, that I'm quite happy with. But my gosh, I wish I had drank more green juices. I wish I drank more water. I wish I'd exercised more. I wish I read more books. But the big thing, the big unconscious bang didn't happen to me. And I just like wish there was like a formula or a freaking supplement or something that people could take or there literally is. I mean, we've got psychedelic medications and all these types of things that people could take to help open their minds, literally to start thinking in different ways and unraveling the boxes of what we think our current personality is. And you touched on the spiritual element, which is absolutely so vastly important. And I was listening to this really cool Joe Rogan podcast last night about the cosmos and how we have this unbelievable thing above us that we have to connect to spirituality and something bigger than us. But with lights and city lights around us, it just gets absolutely like glazed over and we don't see it. But when you like step out into the country and you've got complete darkness around you and you look up to this unbelievable thing that all our ancestors would have had every single night, and they're like their connection to their spiritual self and their present self would have just been so superior to what we have now. And I wish we had some sort of formula, some sort of way, because people try all the time. There are documentaries about this type of thing. There are people talking all over the world about how you can start changing your mind and doing it. But people like have to have a big thing happen to them before they start thinking differently. And it's a very interesting phenomena.
I think what we need to do, Simon, is stick everyone out and on a camping adventure, tenting for about 2 weeks, out in the middle of nature. Right, you'll get a reappreciation and a new connection that you haven't had before, or maybe haven't had recently. Sometimes people say that 2 weeks is enough to reset your circadian rhythm. But all the stuff you talk about, you're right. I mean, this subconscious behavior that we've developed, these habits, and largely ingrained, or maybe wired ourselves in a way to think a certain way, up to the age of 7. A lot of that wiring happens then, and a lot of adults are just walking around with child egos. This child subconscious, and we don't even realize that 95% of the time the things we do during the day are completely automated and are completely subconscious. We're not even thinking about these things at all. So how do you reconnect to these things we talk about? Well, you certainly aren't going to do it sitting in front of your TV, which a lot of us are doing. You certainly aren't connecting to the earth when we're walking around in rubber-soled shoes. Now, it's winter out here. Of course, that makes it difficult. But even in the summer, things like that, I mean, one of my greatest things to do is go to the beach, get my shoes, obviously, bare feet, sand, soil, sun, water, all those things that connect. And I instantly feel a connection. It's kind of like everything else kind of washes away when that happens. But we've disconnected ourselves from it. Like I said, rubber-soled shoes have disconnected. The TV has disconnected us. Fluoride and other things that maybe have permeated and created toxic burden inside of our pineal gland that maybe separates us from our consciousness. There's just so many ways that we've been forcibly disconnected from who we really are. And again, it's not anyone's real fault. It's just, this is what we've been programmed into. And as I said before, the world was set up in a way, is set up in a way that doesn't leave us healthy. And we have to really work at it now. We have to have a skill set to disconnect from these things, disconnect from the city, the commercialization, all those things, and get back to the things that actually make us healthy. And that can take a lot of effort. But I think if you did it for any period of time, there may be that rediscovery and that appreciation of nature and the things that it does bring for us in many different ways. But you got to make that decision. If you don't, then you're going to just be in the program grid, and you're going to continue to think that you are, and just continue to go your subconscious behaviors and automated, autopilot 95% of the time, and nothing changes until something big and bad happens. And then you might, again, sometimes it doesn't happen for people where they don't rediscover anything and they just fall back into, we'll say, sleepwalking. But sometimes it does. And I think when you do have that opportunity, as painful as it was for me, it was my opportunity to break out and completely turn things around. And I did.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to describe the majority of people, like, we're very isolated. We are everything helps us kind of translate that we're just like this one person, and we get really selfish with that. We get very egotistical with that. But when you were to step out and stargaze with absolute quiet, a little bit of sensory deprivation, and you look up at the stars and look at the cosmos, you recognize that there's something bigger than you. You are connected to it. But I think that would be a very, very interesting therapy to help a lot of people recognize that, one, they're not alone, and two, that a lot of the things that we do and a lot of the external things that we have around us that we don't necessarily think we have control over, significantly determine our state of being. I just take, for example, the fact that I've got 3 lights pointing at me right now. I've got Wi-Fi coming in. I've got these EMFs coming from my screen and my camera here and my microphone and everything. And I'm aware of all those things, that's for sure. And I know that is going to interact probably negatively with the bioelectrical circuits that I have running within my primarily neurological system. Mm-hmm. And if I go out to nature and I sit with that, it's a cleansing experience, because I don't have those things coming in anymore. My body can recalibrate to that. But most people have got no idea about how electricity plays a significant role in our biology, mm-hmm. and how these external sources of frequency can also wreak havoc with that. And especially if we're not taking a break and getting away from it, and going out in nature and just being within a forest, or just being on mountainsides, you can't not be moved by that experience, be that within your physical body or in your mental body, because it's just a vicious cleansing of the kind of wild cultural world that we live in, where we've just got screens everywhere and we need distractions coming in from right, left and center, and the light factor. It's interesting. I think you're certainly onto something in regards to helping people take themselves out of their everyday, physically taking them outside of their everyday normality and get them getting them somewhere closer that our biology was actually designed for. I think there's certainly something big in that, because I just don't want people to suffer for 10, 20 years until something that big thing happens to them, and then they have to do something about it, right? Because it's literally wasted time of being with pain and being with discomfort and being sad and being depressed and being anxious, when people just don't have to do that. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. But we've just gone past the 40-minute mark here. I want to be conscious of your time here, Derek. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the Thrive Academy and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, so the Thrive Academy was the program that I created through that 3,500 hours and all the money and experimentation that I went through for a period of 10 years. And it's a program that I created that focuses on nutrition, supplementation, and lifestyle. So a very holistic view of again, not only obtaining optimal health, but reversing health problems, serious health problems as well. That seems to be a real issue. My whole goal was to make it simple, relatively simple, serve these things up on a silver platter, and allow someone to follow a program that is sustainable. There's a lot of information out there these days, and discerning what's true and what isn't can be very difficult. And separating the wheat from the chaff, as a good prairie boy might say, is very important, because there's a lot of chatter, there's a lot of background noise out there. And for me, I say no matter who it is, who you follow, make sure that the individual that you're following or talking to has had some experience in the area, and successful experience in the area, either with themselves or with others, in terms of what it is that you want to do. But again, you got to make this simple, because there's so much information out there. So I've really distilled, concentrated, wrapped everything up into a nice tight little package where people can follow. Again, for all kinds of, there's been over 20 different chronic disease conditions that have been largely solved or reversed through the Thrive Academy, through this simple concept that I developed as a result of my own experience and my own research. And it's a very simple way to follow for those that maybe want to abandon the conventional medical system, or are tired of taking prescriptions, or want to be able to do these types of things. It gives them an opportunity to kind of dive in full on head first and have the information completely present and in their lap, without having to go through some of those things like you and I went through, where you're spending 5, 10, 15 years trying to figure it all out. So it's a real foundational approach. It's been a very effective approach. I've been operating it for 8 years now, so it's been largely successful, and it's a great way to be able to reset or recalibrate, as you would say, yourself back to health. So how do you find me? Well, I'm pretty much anywhere these days, on most social media and things like that. But I think probably the most easiest way to find me would be to go to my website, healingthebody.ca. And there you'll find, you'll find a newsletter. You'll find me in the different social media channels I'm on, which can direct you right to it, whether it be, my personal Facebook page, or my business Facebook page, or my Instagram account, or even my Telegram account, depending on what kind of information you want. Whether you want more of the straight, bold truth, you go to Telegram more so for that. If you want to have more conversations, you're on Facebook. But all that stuff will be on healingthebody.ca. You'll see the newsletter and the different social media accounts that you can connect with me on, and that's probably the best place to start.
Perfect. Well, I'm so glad that you're out there. I'm so happy that you shared your story with us today, and it's obviously very, very motivating to even hear it. And I think that it can be quite powerful for other people who are maybe not in the exact same circumstance, but maybe in similar circumstances of being in the transitional period where they're wanting to do things differently, and listening to your story, listening to what you've gone through, listening to how you did it, and then also giving people the ability to connect with you, to maybe ask questions, or even go through a program that you've clearly developed back off your education and primarily your experience of going through these things as well. So I'm just super glad that you're out there and you're doing this thing, man. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
Awesome, Derek. Well, I will make sure that all the show notes for connecting with Derek are available. So the links will be in the show notes to connect with Derek. That is it for this week of Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and why don't you leave us a review on iTunes if you fancy it. But that's it for this week. We will see you soon.